Good afternoon, everyone. My name is Mark Peralivas. Welcome to video 4 of my special report on the Upper Grand District School Board and racism within their staff and elected trustees, as well as attempting to problem solve that identified racism with the upper management of the Upper Grand District School Board. If you've not been watching my other videos, you should probably go watch the other videos and then jump into this one. This one's got a lot of the meat and the potatoes, I think. This is a lot of the meaningful stuff, and there are a lot of interesting revelations in the emails to come. So, let's get right into it. So yesterday, the end of the video was the end of the meeting that I had had with the superintendent of inclusivity and equity. And during that meeting, which was a fine meeting, very few questions got real answers. So the next morning I got up and penned an email, and here's the email. And she responded and she says, "Hello, Mark, my responses are embedded in your email below in blue." So I'm going to read the top half of the email. The bottom half of the email is me saying that I want to be included in the equity and in the work group that's moving forward to develop this plan, because I feel like, because I wanted to have some input into it, because I'm a parent at the Upper Grand District School Board. I make my case, and the superintendent says she'll pass on my request. I don't have a lot of confidence that request has been passed on or will be acted on, but I'm waiting for my letter. Regardless, I'm just going to read the top part of this email, and then this email, and then we're going to get into the end of this story and perhaps the beginning of the next one. So here we go. I'm going to read the email that's combined, and I'm going to get me out of the way so I don't have to keep moving me, because that's kind of annoying. Okay, here we go. Good morning, Cheryl. I wanted to follow up. First, I called you Kathy at the end of our conversation yesterday. Apologies, I got my names crossed. I realized as I said it. Regardless, sorry about that. And she says, thank you. On to some thoughts. I would really like to understand the working definition of racism that the board is using. We talked about it briefly, but didn't define it. I think it's very important to define something like that when creating these plans. I have the definition of discrimination that the board is working with, but can't find documentation about the working definition of racism. Her response is, racism is a belief that race is the primary determinant of human traits and capacities, and that racial differences produce an inherent superiority of a particular race. Institutional racism, also known as systemic racism, is a form of racism that is embedded as a normal procedure within society or an organization. It can lead to such issues as discrimination in criminal justice, employment, housing, healthcare, political power, education, among other issues. These definitions are taken from Webster's and Wikipedia. What I asked for is the working definition of racism that the board is using. This is not that, but I'll get to that. Carrying on with the email. You claimed, this is me again, you claimed that track and field being run during Ramadan is an example of systemic racism. You said resistance to moving it was not valid and was based in racism, not explicitly, but that was the thrust of the conversation at that point. The Ramadan holiday is a month long. This year it was April 23rd to May 23rd. Is it the board position that no board activities can be set during that time? And she says Ramadan, as well as other celebrations, should be considered when planning school and board events. And I say, is it the board's position that if Muslim children choose to miss track and field, as is their religious right, should other children be forced to miss track and field? She said, and she responds, no, a date that accommodates all students should be found. And I say, does the board believe that to be more fair? She says, yes. In the Upper Grand District School Board, what school has the highest Muslim population? She says, we don't collect that data. What percentage of the student population is Muslim in that school? She says, we do not collect this data. And I say, I don't need the name of the school. I'm just trying to understand how many people this example impacts. So what are the real numbers? And so here, I'll continue reading this email just for brevity's sake. I say, is the tradition of track and field in our system valued by the board? Yes. If not, why are our traditions less important than traditions from other parts of the world? And I'm noting this because in the June 16th meeting, there was talk about how people liking their traditions and wanting to continue with their traditions was somehow racist. I'll get the time index for you if you're interested in that, but that's where that question came from. Back to the email. I'll also note Islam is not a race. It is a religion that anyone can join. There are many Arab Muslims, but there are also many white British Muslims, for example. I would also like to request to be on the Equity and Inclusivity Committee working group that develops this equity plan going forward. During the June 16th meeting and on the June 24th meeting, Jessica Roden and Kalinda stated that a diverse group of all stakeholders was needed to develop this policy. She asked for contact information and said very clearly that these parents' voices were wanted and needed. I know that I have a different perspective than most people currently developing the plan, and I know they will likely not want me included, but as a parent with students in the board and an FSLAC member, I feel that I should be allowed to join the group spoken about to help craft the direction of this language. Are you the correct person to express my interest to, or should I contact Kalinda and Jessica directly? Considering the context, perhaps an email from you would help facilitate this. Finally, who would I contact to make a formal complaint about the racist language used during the June 16th meeting by board employees? I'm going to read her responses in just a minute. I want to note as well that people have been asking me, how can I help? How can I help? I have students in the board. How can I help? You can make an HR complaint about these things. These are racist. These are in contravention of the Education Act, 169(1)(a)(1). This is not appropriate for a board staff member to be making comments like this. And it's not appropriate to take a month to have to deal with this. Like a month to identify a problem and get the runaround for both of these issues. And I know we're only talking about this one, but it's incredible. It's incredible. Like, just unbelievable. Okay, I'll read the responses. I don't anticipate that I'm going to be invited to these. I've seen emails. I'm on other committees, so I've seen emails to other committees, and I know there's movement. So I'm not anticipating actually being invited. I'll be following up though. Okay, so the response is letters will be going out later this summer inviting community agencies and organizations to appoint a member to the Safe and Inclusive Schools Steering Committee, which will provide feedback to the Equity Steering Committee. Please let the organization you belong to know that you're interested in representing them. Jessica had sent out letters to all community agencies and organizations that the board works with, inviting feedback on the equity plan. The equity policy will not be reviewed until the 2021 school year. Kalinda and Jessica report to the superintendent. She will share the request with them when they meet again in the fall. And when I requested the correct person to share my concerns with, she said that depends on the person you are referring to. If it is a complaint about Kalinda or Jessica, you report to me, the superintendent. And if it is about me, if the complaint is about the superintendent, then I would report it to Dr. Rogers. If it is a trustee, you report it to the chair of the board. Okay, so I followed all of that advice. And then my response to that is, hello, Cheryl, thanks for your response. What was the definition of racism, or when was the definition of racism updated by the board? What year? What was the definition updated from? What was the previous definition? Do you have a document that has the working, sorry, it didn't jump up, or it fell down on me, that has the working definitions that I can have a link to? It would be much easier than asking you for every definition. And she says, I do not have any previous documentation regarding the definition of racism. And I say, with regards to Ramadan, I agree finding a date that works for all stakeholders is ideal. You noted that you thought the pushback on finding a date was based in racism. I noted the length of the holiday because that could easily explain the reluctance to change the date with so many other things happening at that time of year in the school board. Compromise is necessary, is it not? Particularly when organizing a complex schedule like a school board's yearly schedule. And part of compromise and negotiation is abstaining from tacitly accusing the people you're negotiating with of racism when what they're likely trying to do is accommodate everyone. During the June 16th meeting, there was no mention of joining the community or subcommittee through community groups. It was a direct plea for parental participation. I can find the exact wording if you'd like. I would like to directly join the committee. Thank you for understanding and facilitating this. When does this committee typically meet? She says, I'm not sure which committee was being referred to. If you can send me the time it was discussed in the presentation, I will definitely follow up. And then I carry on. I'll note I did ask you about this during our call. These identity group subcommittees, if there's an anti-Black racism and Black brilliance, there should also be equal opportunity for all other races. If the board insists on separating people by race, then the board needs to equally support all races with subcommittees. Where is the anti-Native racism, anti-Asian racism, anti-brown racism, anti-white racism subcommittee? Where are the Native brilliance, brown brilliance, white brilliance, and Asian brilliance subcommittees? This is a genuine question. Why does the board feel it is acceptable to focus on only one race and provide subcommittees for only one race while claiming that, and I meant to come back and finish this, so that's kind of frustrating, but while claiming that they're being inclusive to all, they're actually being racist, right? Back to this, the June 16 meeting at 5425, anti-Black racism and Black brilliance steering group for staff who want to drive that work. Will the board be doing the same with all other races? What is the timeline? Because they're talking about fast implementation of their Black brilliance steering committee and Black brilliance groups within schools. I'll come back now because these are smaller. And she says, thanks for the information, Mark. Definitions of racism and anti-racism will be added to the equity policy when it's reviewed next year. It will go out for public consultation. I will let Jessica know of your interest in committee involvement. And I said, good afternoon, Cheryl. Am I to understand that the board does not have current definitions of racism, anti-racism, or toxic masculinity while at the same time referring to and using these terms in the 2019-2022 equity plan and presentations to the Board of Trustees? And she says, we will have the definitions in the updated equity, human rights policies. And I say, thanks for the response. Thanks for the response. I'm trying to understand how the board is generating this equity policy. It is very difficult to use terms like toxic masculinity when that is not defined. Same with terms like anti-racism or anti-racist, and other terms that were used often during the June 16th meeting. This is concerning because if these terms are being used but aren't defined, they could mean anything. Why the delay in publishing the definitions? I understand you stated that you will have them in the upcoming policies, but do they exist now? If not, why was the equity plan signed off on with such unclear, undefined language? If so, why am I not allowed to see what definitions the board is working with? I'm not trying to be a pain or a jerk or anything. Sometimes text is hard to read and I can be demanding. I'm genuinely wondering in good faith if there is a process that I'm not understanding or a procedure that covers this in the interim to the language being defined or something, then I'm more than happy to read up on it if provided a link. I've looked, but I have not been successful in finding anything. Thank you. And Cheryl responds, hi Mark, the definitions as you request do not exist in current policy. They will be in updated policies as per the process we follow. There is no delay and I'm not hiding anything from you. And I say, thank you for your clarification. Have a good weekend. At this point, and this is the end of Cheryl and this is the superintendent and my conversation. And I know that I called her Kathy, I think in one of the early videos. So again, Cheryl, if you're watching, I apologize that I got your name wrong. I hung it on the wrong hat in my brain. But Cheryl, that's the end of our conversation. And I still have concerns. So at this point, I still have concerns about, one, the equity plan using language that is citing critical race theory. I don't have any indication or an update about this and have no indication that I should expect one. Critical race theory, number two, being used in training of teachers and administrators as stated by Cheryl during our meeting. That's happening and that's not appropriate. This is a theory that says white people are to blame for all racism. It gives collective guilt by virtue of your skin color. Replace white with any other race. And I'm not being hyperbolic here. Critical race theory targets white people. It's not saying the majority population, like in China, critical race theory would be critical of Han Chinese, right? Like native Chinese. Or in India, there would be a specific race that it was targeting as well. But in Canada, well, no, critical race theory, the world round, is targeting white people. So regardless of whether you're in China or India, it's saying that white people are still to blame. I don't think they use critical race theory in China or India. I'm just using that as an example of other populations that have a non-majority white. Okay, that's the reason that I brought those up. So critical race theory being used in the training of administrators and teachers is in contravention of the Education Act 169(1)(a)(1), where an equal, well, hold on, I'll read it so I'm not paraphrasing. Here it is. Every board shall promote a positive school climate that is inclusive and accepting of all pupils, including pupils of any race. I don't see how saying all white people are welcome here, but understand that you are the reason for racism. That is not being inclusive or accepting. And I don't understand how collective guilt, just by virtue of someone's skin color, could be possibly acceptable by the people who are running things. So regardless of whether they're training students or administrators or principals or teachers, there's no way that is acceptable for training for anybody. Back to this. How is it not seen as racist to say that all systems built by any race are inherently racist because they were built by any race? How can a Board of Education stand by that statement? Number four, during the June 16th meeting, the education curriculum lead clearly states that the language of critical race theory will be used in developing the next equity plan. She says that twice. And so I followed up with Martha Rogers, and I sent this email to her secretary, her admin assistant. And I said, hello, I would like to set a meeting with Martha Rogers to discuss racism at her board. Here is the overview of the concerns that I have. 1, the use of critical race theory in the development of the equity plan. 2, serious flaws in the current equity plan compared to the previous equity plan. 3, racist people openly using racist terminology at board meetings and in presentations to board trustees. 4, The numbering's all off. Board trustees ignoring the code of conduct that they are required to sign. 5, board trustees and chair of the committee I sit on using board email to defame a parent of students in your board who reached out to them with concerns. 5, 6, whatever we're on. Board trustees chair not taking a parent complaint seriously and refusing to even investigate it despite claiming that she had. I have some very serious concerns that I have tried to communicate through the proper channels. Now, again, people in positions who should be able to answer my questions or help me solve my problem are ignoring me. I am in contact with lawyers and I'm looking at more than one case regarding this situation. I would like to solve this in a quiet way. I'll move me up here. I'd like to solve this in a quiet way. I've worked in education for 15 years, and I even worked for the Upper Grand District School Board at the beginning of my career. I'm a former union steward and contract negotiator. I understand this world well. If you are unable to help me solve this problem, then I will continue to take this up the chain. I have also informed newspapers. I have all emails and a very clear case. Here is the board employee making blatantly racist statements that go against the Human Rights Code of Ontario and contravene the Education Act 169(1)(a)(1). And that's the video I've showed at the beginning. Here is a response from the secretary. It says, "Good afternoon, Mr. Peralvis. The concerns you expressed have been addressed by superintendent and the chair of the board. Regards." And I said, okay. Here is the final email. This is the final email, I believe. Hold on a sec. Let me double check. So this is the last email I sent that got a response. There's one more email I sent. So I'll read this one, read the response, read that email, and then we're done. And then I've got a couple more videos to do, but the majority of it is done. Okay, so here we go. After being told that my concerns have been addressed by the superintendent and the chair of the board, my email is this. "Hello, Amy. While doing my write-up to complain about my concerns not being addressed, I realized that I needed more information before I could formally write up my complaint. I have serious concerns that were brought to the chair of the board and to the superintendent Van Utengam. I believe that my concerns have been ignored and not dealt with. To the superintendent, I asked for her to address 1. The use of critical race theory in developing language for plans or policies contravenes the Education Act 169(a)(1). I brought this up to the superintendent and she did not address it. She stated that CRT would not be used except in training for administrators and teachers. CRT blames white people for all of the racism experienced by people of color. This is obviously in contravention of the Education Act. The superintendent told me that was just my opinion. It is not. It is clearly stated in the CRT documentation. Blaming any race for all of the problems of another race is racist and is not appropriate for a school board. It is in contravention of the Education Act, and it's troubling that I need to explain that in my email to the Director of Education at this board. 2. Racist statements made by staff during the June 16th meeting. I complained about the racist statements made by the staff during the June 16th presentation to the Board of Trustees. All systems built by your race are inherently racist because they were built by your race. In reply, superintendent said that she would speak to HR, but that the person who made the statements is still working in the board in other roles during the summer. I do not feel my complaint was taken seriously because the superintendent stated that she wouldn't be dealing with it until the fall. If that is the case, and I believe it to be the case, that is not appropriate. Why is my complaint not being taken seriously by your staff? To the chair of the Board of Trustees, I tried to address Trustee Ross lying about a parent, me, to other trustees, blatantly. The chair of the Board of Trustees did not address my complaint. Instead, she said the trustee violated email etiquette by including me in the response. This is not the complaint that I made. Trustee Ross stated in an email, quote, "I agree with our philosophy that the white victors wrote the rules and wrote history, and it is inherently biased because of that. I have asked her and asked the chair what this means. What biased history is she speaking of? What white victors of what battle? What is she referring to? Are trustees using board emails allowed to ignore a parent's question like this? Are board trustees using board email to trade racist, speculative philosophies about white people? Is that acceptable? Is that allowed by the code of conduct? What exactly is she speaking of here? Do other trustees believe in a biased white history written by victors of some undefined conflict? Is the chair of the board allowed to dismiss a parent's concern without addressing it? Are they allowed to gaslight parents? What has been done to address the complaint being taken with no seriousness? And what oversight does Dr. Rogers, I put Miss, but I forgot that she was a doctor at the time, have over the board trustees? 5, Trustee Ross is not abiding by the Upper Grand District School Board Code of Conduct. I've outlined the numerous violations in other emails. Does this matter? Can I complain to anyone, or will it also be ignored? Does Ms. Rogers have any ability Does Ms. Rogers have any ability to address this? If not, can she direct me to who I should be bringing this up to? I post a news article about the stepping down of the chair of the Catholic board for posting racist hate speech on his personal private Facebook, but we're not allowed to know what he posted. I know what he posted, but the paper didn't print what he posted. If you want to know what he posted, I'm not going to publicly say it, but well, it's interesting that he lost his chairship, and we have board trustees who are making blatantly racist statements, and I don't know that anything has happened at all. I don't know that they've even had a conversation other than to say somebody's upset and they're talking about it. So I don't know. Back to the email. Ms. Rogers' assertion that my concerns have been addressed is incorrect. She came to that conclusion either because she has been incorrectly informed or because she has no interest in hearing about the racist staff and the racist trustees. I'm not sure which. I've worked in education for a lot of my adult life. I worked at the Upper Grand District School Board, Waterloo Catholic District School Board, St. Agatha since 2002. The conduct of the Upper Grand District School Board during this issue leaves a lot to be desired. I'm trying to solve this very serious problem, and I feel like no one wants to address it. Instead, they want to gaslight me and ignore me until I go away. I'm not going away. I'm looking forward to finding out how these concerns were addressed specifically. If they weren't addressed, then I will submit my formal complaint about superintendent, and I will be publishing a case study about how difficult this issue has been to discuss with this board. Let me know if you want the link and I'll send it. Have a good day. Feel free to send this link. This is the response. Good afternoon, Mr. Peralvis. I can assure you that your concerns have not been ignored and that they have been dealt with. Critical race theory and the anti-racism work the board is doing does not contravene Education Act 169(1). Everyone, and so she just copies the act that I've been reciting ad nauseum during this entire video series with no explanation. That doesn't explain anything. Thank you, Ms. Rogers, but doesn't help me. Number 2, your complaint was taken seriously. Superintendent did notify HR about your complaint. Teaching staff returned for their official teaching assignments on Monday, August 31st. Follow-up regarding your complaint about Kalinda Klein is between the employee and the HR department. 3, number 4 and 5, the chair of the board addressed the situation with the trustees and responded to your emails. Your concerns have been heard, documented, addressed, and followed up on by Superintendent, Chair McNeil, Dr. Rogers, and the Executive Officer of Human Resources. Dr. Rogers has no further comments. And my response is, hello, I'm sorry, I still don't understand the basic rationalization for use of the critical race theory. Critical race theory says that all racism is at core white people's fault, and it's caused by white people's attempts to uphold white supremacy. This theory blames white people for all of the problems of racism. How is it use in training by the boards in line with section 169(1)(a)(1)? You quote the section as if it's an explanation. It is not. Training principals and teachers that racism is a white person's fault is not creating a safe environment for everyone. Can you help me understand how the board views CRT and how that promotes a positive student environment for all students? How could blaming a whole race for racism possibly help? I honestly do not understand. The conduct and language of the staff involved, specifically staff making racist statements to the board of trustees during presentations, lead me to believe that CRT is not an effective way to keep a positive learning environment. They are using undefined language, including anti-male language, liberally and will not give definitions when asked. Believe me, I've tried. Please help me understand how critical race theory upholds a positive environment that is accepting and inclusive of all students when it is specifically blaming an entire race for all of the problems of racism. I am being as genuine as I can possibly be. I'm trying desperately to understand how this can be okay with people educating children. I worked in the field for 15 years with the most vulnerable population, Section 21, 23 classrooms at St. Agatha, among other stints in education. I am not trolling you or trying to waste your time. I am a father who is very concerned about this. I have not received a response. Character, right? Character, Upper Grand District School Board. You lack it. You lack it. And that's the last I've heard of these people. So if you want to help, file an HR complaint. If you want to help, contact these people too and say, why is your racist staff and your racist trustee allowed to use your board technology to spread their racist language and their racist ideas through policy, through your board, Martha Rogers? You know about this and you don't care. And that is unacceptable. Unacceptable. Thank you for watching, everybody. There are more videos coming. You haven't seen anything yet. The jaw-dropping trustee case is worse than this, absolutely worse than this. And it's unbelievable what this trustee said in order to undermine me when all I did was ask for help. I asked genuinely for help. That's coming up next. I'm going to do the equity, the difference between the equity plans as well. So stay tuned. And this is egregious. This is unbelievable that they think that they can say your issues have been addressed. They have not. They have not. And so, more videos to come. Thanks for watching, everybody. Check out CanadaPoly.com, check out CanadaReport.co, and have a wonderful, wonderful